Kosi Yanke online, kindly put on your video. And Dr. Kevit Desai, also kindly put on your video. These are our panelists who are online so that we can start. We want to see the face to the name. And for the participants in the room, we have 2 virtual participants, and they'll be sitting right next to us near the screens. I hope you'll also be able to see them. So we are waiting to see their faces, and then we can start on the introduction. Kosi Yanke, joining us all the way from Ghana. And we have Dr. Kevit Desai, also joining us remotely. Okay, I can see them on the big screen here. Okay, I think we will just proceed. I don't know if they can hear us. Can you indicate that we can hear us clear, loud and clear from Nairobi? Kosi and Dr. Desai, can you say hi? Okay, we will just proceed, and they will, perfect. There I can see Dr. Desai. Thank you, Dr. Desai. We can see you. Can you say hi so that we hear you? Your audio is okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I look forward to this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kosi Yanke? Okay, I think we will just proceed. Good afternoon once again. Good afternoon to the people joining us remotely, and also to the people in plenary. Very glad to see you. And this afternoon, we have a panel discussion, and I'll proceed and go ahead and introduce. We have physically with us here, John Bosco Kalisa, on my immediate left. He's the Executive Director and CEO of East African Business Council. Next to him, we have Tobias Gaster, and he's the head of GIZ, head of division, Africa Supra-Regional and Horn of Africa. And of course, physically, we also have my co-moderator joining me on the other side, Kawala. And remotely, we have Dr. Kevit Desai. Dr. Desai is the Principal Secretary, State Department of East Africa Community, EAC of Kenya. And we also have Kosi Yanke Aye, who we are waiting to actually just confirm that she's available. Kosi Yanke Aye is the first female CEO of the Ghana Enterprises Agency. And now to start off our panel, I'll shoot a question, and this is for John Bosco and Kosi. Maybe we can start with John Bosco. From your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities and challenges for sustainable economic development in Africa in the coming years? Let me repeat again. From where you sit, what are the biggest opportunities and challenges for sustainable economic development in Africa in the coming years?
Good afternoon, viewers, those attending virtually and those present in the room. As moderator has ably highlighted, this is an opportunity in the sense that Africa is rising. I remember in 2000, there was an article from Economist about Africa as a dark continent. But I want to say and confirm that Africa has changed its narratives. It has changed its narratives in terms of the development progress it has made. And as the moderator has said, what are the opportunities? And let me also highlight that Africa has demonstrated resilience during COVID. and I want to confirm what my brother Albert said. There was a projection in 2020 by African Development Bank that Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, is going to slide into recession. And the numbers were given, but I wanted to confirm that we didn't go through the recession. The reason was that Africa has very strong fundamentals anchored on strong infrastructure, on a strong institution, on a strong public-private partnership, including our development partner who are here, that we've forged a strong partnership. So those were very strong. Coming to the East Africa really, even during COVID, we posted a positive growth, 0.4 average, but other countries were almost posting 3.5. So those are some strong fundamentals that we need to build on in terms of building the Africa we want, building back better. And we can only build back better with 4 key paradigms. 1, we need to strengthen our regional and continental value chain. 2, industrialization. We need to add value to our products, be it agriculture, be it minerals. It is important that we add value. We diversify, because from East Africa, where I come from, we realized that the value chain were among the shock absorbers of COVID, because we had to repurpose some of our mitigation measures, especially textile garments, leather and leather-related products. We had to ensure that we have that inward looking. Another important aspect that the region and Africa has done quite very well is the investment in infrastructure, both hard and soft infrastructure. That was a key driver of our transformation. Then, as you highlighted, when you look at where we want to be, and I always say this is a game changer, Africa to embrace continental free trade area. That is a shift. That's where jobs are going to be created. And I want to echo from my brother Albert when he said that is a game changer, because the jobs we anticipate will be created through our light manufacturing industry, through building a resilience and a regional value chain, and through inclusive growth, where women in trade and youth have to play a critical role. So I think that is the key focus and the key paradigm I'm talking about as Africa, as we strive to build back better, as we strive to sustain our economy, we need to base on those strong fundamentals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Before Kosi replies to the same question, Dr. Desai, thank you for joining us. We recognize that you'll be leaving after about 10 minutes, and so we'll soon get back to you. Kosi, do you have anything to add to what John has just mentioned? I don't know if you are online. I've not heard from you, Kosi.
Yes.
Did you hear the question?
Hi.
Hello, Kosi. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Can you repeat the question? Hi. So thank you very much. If you can repeat the question, there's a lag in time, so I wasn't able to catch it, and I sent a message, but it didn't come through. So if you don't mind.
Okay, so let me just retake the question just for you very quickly. From where you sit, from your perspective, what are the biggest opportunities and challenges for sustainable economic development in Africa in the coming years? Kosi, very briefly. Can I take that again, Kosi?
Maybe we go to Dr. Desai.
Yes.
So, Dr. Desai, we're going to go to you. We've just heard that strengthening the regional and continental value chains is something important that needs to be done, and that the African continental free trade area
is a game changer. However, so I'm a tough questioner. We've heard this before in Africa. Game changers, you know, every few years we come up with a game changer. And the reality is that very little that gets decided at continental level actually makes it down to implementation on the ground. I believe the statistic is less than 10% of the decisions taken by the AU can actually be considered as implementation. What needs to happen differently this time, Dr. Desai? We all see the potential of the Continental Free Trade Area. We all see what it could produce. What needs to happen so that this time it actually gets to implementation level on the ground?
Thank you. And indeed, when we look at the issue of sustainability, we need to identify the very values of sustainability by way of enhancing productivity, innovation, and efficiency. Now, I want to assure everyone present here that we've seen remarkable progress, and I think that this should give confidence to everyone in this room with respect to some of the transformations that we witnessed. Let me very briefly just scan them through you with a view of you considering them. First and foremost, over the last 2 years under the chairmanship of Kenya, we've seen big strides with respect to the review of the common market with respect to the East African community. This should further promote and modernize a document and a structure that was established in 2009, but needs to consider the effects of technology, for example, or value chains, and so on, or simply the modernization of commerce. Secondly, we've seen that within the context recently, we've seen the consensus by the East African community to come to an agreement on common external tariffs. Now, this speaks to all that you've said earlier on, because for the first time, we're beginning to see as a bloc, we're going to create a four-band structure from 0, 10, 25, 35, from raw materials all the way to finished goods. What does that mean? It means that for the first time, we're beginning to see a productive and a structured effort towards creating a market system consisting of policies, legislations, regulations, and standards. And it's through this ecosystem that the greatest return of investment and security and sustainability exists. But it requires tremendous involvement by way of the creation of standards, the creation of dedicated infrastructure, the coordination capacities, and so on. But the groundwork, the foundation, has been led by the fact that, you know, the partner states have agreed by consensus to the common external tariff. And this is a major step which took 7 years, but in the making brought about the collaboration of many different partner states and their ambitions and what they espouse as far as industrialization is concerned. Thirdly, we see that recently DRC Congo has joined us, and in the next summit they will deposit their instruments, having ratified them in Parliament, and this would be a transformative value chain and value proposition for any kind of investment, based on the fact that, you know, you're looking at 300 million people, and this is considering that the EAC is ambitious towards a federation, which means that, you know, you're looking at the fourth largest federation in the world, you know, after India, China, the United States, and then would come the East African community. But what's also very critical here is that one of the biggest and most transformative world trade routes will cut and link the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. You'll have an abundance of diversity by way of people, their thinking, their outlook on innovation, but also the natural resources that would be an ample opportunity in terms of value addition. Now, these three areas are significant steps by way of what we already have. And what we also need to look into as far as sustainability, because it's not just a trade bloc that we need to focus on. It's a holistic transformation. Within the context of EAC, we're looking at everything from healthcare to educational standards and their transferability within the EAC, to the issues surrounding security and mitigating greater levels of policing to counterfeit and terrorist activities, etc., and so on. And all of this dialogue and collaboration then points, to a fourth very distinct foundation, and that is, in order for businesses and industrialization to succeed, it requires an ecosystem. It just doesn't require trade mentality. And the East African community is the value proposition. And finally, with respect to larger African continental programs, over the last 2 months, as a bloc, as EAC, we arrived at the threshold in order to meet 1,500 tariff lines with respect to the African Continental Free Trade Area, thereby ensuring that the bloc has access to some 44 countries. So I think that the driver here is a well-coordinated structure, a structure that has the utmost collective responsibility by way of all the different stakeholders, whether it's the private sector, civil society, the academics, and the government, in order to then create the very foundation that the continental programs will take off on. And indeed, the East African community is increasingly a value proposition. What obviously needs to be done is that programming efforts, and the GIZ has been a long-term legacy partner together with the German government in the development and transformation within the context of East Africa, and I think Africa broadly. But what is clearly required here is a collective responsibility. And to illustrate this further, some of the programs that they've done in vocational and technical training have necessitated the involvement of the private sector in setting the standard and developing the standard and implementing the standards within the context of activity education. But similarly, this has to cut across, and increasingly any kind of project or funding program really need to be tied towards the sustainability and the guarantee that there will be a definite effort to not only achieve sustainability, but profitability within the context of business and the transformation, in view of the fact that, there's so much potential, and it's time that stakeholders like the private sector and stakeholders who are central towards industrial platforms really take up that responsibility. And finally, I think that it's absolutely critical that dialogue systems take place at all levels. Within the context of government and the public sector, we have seen a synthesis within the context of EAC and the Continental Free Trade Program. But more needs to be done within the context of private sector and civil society to create the necessary associations within the East African community to collectively share opportunity, to bring different stakeholders together, whether it's, for example, the transporters, the logistics providers, the traders, the manufacturers, to share opportunity, to share the response to productivity challenges, to share the responsibility towards further investment. And I think that, I believe that I have shared, compelling evidence now here that, action needs to be taken based on, the development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Desai, for giving that broad picture. I hope that everybody could hear him. The sound was a little touch and go, but he basically was giving the example of the ecosystem that the EAC has created through policies, regulations, and standards, and giving as one of their key results the common external tariffs that they have been able to agree upon through a variety of mechanisms, the private sector and the public sector working together with dialogue systems to be able to establish this. And he points out that the DRC joining the EAC really strengthens its value proposition as a huge federation. And this kind of serves as an example of how the African continental free trade area could develop. And he notes that the EAC has been able to satisfy some of the conditions already to access the continental free trade area. Mr. Gerster, he also mentioned that this has been done with support from GIZ. And we heard earlier from the other speakers that Germany is one of the biggest supporters of the continental free trade area. What are you, what are you thinking? What are you hoping as we move into this era of a more continental approach? Yes, for the sustainable development of the continent globally.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. First of all, before I answer your question, I would like to stress once again that I really think the African continental free trade area is a big step forward. And for sure, it is only a big step if we go it, if all countries go it, but we have never been so close. So the fact that it's an African project, that so many states have ratified it, really gives hope for an implementation. And that's exactly how we implement also our support to the African free trade area. We try to build on the experiences in the regional economic communities, for example, EAC or SADC, and we try to bring it to the partner countries. We have 8 countries in Africa where we work directly with the partner countries and their regulations and help them. So that's the approach here. And I think one must not only look at the tariffs, one should also look at non-tariff trade barriers. And I think that's even more of a challenge to lower these, but that's also an area where we try to support. Yeah, I think also, if you think about the fact that you have 54 states in Africa, countries in Africa, and sorry, 1, 2, 3, and many of them are landlocked. And if you look now at the infrastructure map, the infrastructure gap map that Albert just showed, I also believe that the Africa Free Trade Area will boost investment in infrastructure, because then you see a benefit if you build a road from A to B, because many people can use it, and I think that will push economic development in Africa even further and integration further. And basically this is the hope for the continent.
Great, thank you. I don't know if Mrs. Kosi, are you online? I have a feeling that we lost her completely. Okay, great. We'll go ahead and continue. I think one of the questions we have, and that has been mentioned, Dr. Zerfak mentioned it, you have just mentioned it, Mr. Gerster, but kind of like yes, policy is important. Yes, states are important in implementing this, but we know that this is exactly the stumbling block, right? We know that we have fantastic strategies on this continent. We have fantastic policies. Every couple of years, as one of the things I cannot, I have to admit, is that I was listening to Dr. Zerfak and thinking, okay, yeah, every 4 or 5 years, we kind of stir up this pot, we package it differently, and we change some of the labels, and we call it something different, but we get to this stumbling block of states actually implementing. And now we don't have a state actor up here, unfortunately. But I will go, first of all, to the private sector, because you seem to have made some progress in East Africa. What's the secret? What are the elements that help you to move forward on this in East Africa? And what could be done even better, so that we go faster? Because 7 years is kind of long to get to just tariffs. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you are raising a very pertinent question, and I speak from private sector perspective. And I strongly agree with you that it's not about policy. It's not about having a good strategy. We do have good policy. We have good strategy, well-written strategy, even a good negotiator. But the change that is happening in East Africa and at the continental level is that the private sector now is at the forefront in terms of bringing change. Dr. Desai mentioned about CFTA. You've been seeing me in TV advocating how do we promote and protect our infant industry, because that's where jobs are. Jobs are not in any other service sector, but industrial sector. Even from the World Bank study that Albert has highlighted, the biggest change that will happen to the CFTA is not about having a political will, political commitment, and that is also important. But the biggest change is how we bring private sector on board. How do we bring the SMEs and engage SMEs, especially women and the youth in business? Because when you look at the ecosystem, 80% of our business, our jobs are created by micro, small, and medium enterprises. But sometimes even negotiators, they don't bring them in the limelight. That's why the implementation becomes a challenge. But what the magic bullet we have at the ESC is that the ESC community has embraced the power of the private sector to lead in the integration agenda. And the treaty is very clear, people-centered, market-driven integration. Allow me state 4 key elements for the CFTA to work. And where I come from, I've been part of the parcel of the tariff. It's not about tariff. It's about trade facilitation. Even a $450 billion US dollars will not be gained through tariff gains. It is about 300 million will be gained when we embrace trade facilitation, when we reduce border procedures, when we facilitate those informal cross-border trade, when we create an ecosystem that is inclusive. I think that is the paradigm shift we need. We need to bring those who are marginalized, those who are involved in micro and small enterprise, those who are trading across our borders into enjoying the environment we are creating. Second, that is very critical, is enhancing our productive capacity. When you look at the intra-regional trade, at the ESC level is on 13%. At the continental level is 15%. The biggest challenge, we have not invested heavily in our productive capacity. The infrastructure-wise, the logistics-wise, the digital trade we are talking about. And I think GIZ, and I'm happy and I want to appreciate them, that they have been trying to work with us to ensure that we embrace skills mismatch. What the skills that are required to enhance productivity, the skills that are required by our youth, the skills that are required by women, but above all, investing fully in trade facilitation program, reducing those administrative bottlenecks, improving our legal and regulatory framework that is not conducive to grow the prosperity we want in the region and at the continental level. I submit.
Thank you so much. So we're hearing the private sector really occupying space and becoming one of the drivers in building these both regional and continental market blocks. And I think you've pointed out very clearly one of the key elements, the trade barriers, not so much for the big businesses who generally know how to get around the trade barriers, but really for the people who are already doing the cross-border trade. So it's the women who are sitting at the border trying to get their goods from one end, from one country to the other. It's the young people who are very often already trying to do this, and we need to remove the barriers, is what I heard from you, but also perhaps give them the support so that they can do better and bigger business. So I would go to Mr. Gerster to, since morning we've been hearing green and just transformation, and the last aspect we've talked about is definitely in the just category. What are some of the elements for development cooperation as we talk about green and just, even though I kind of agreed with Dr. Zefak when he said, take away the colors, the green, the brown, the blue economy, the orange economy. But we do need sustainability. We must not make the same mistakes that others have made before us. What are the elements for development cooperation as we look at that?
Yeah, I must agree. I also liked his statement about colorful jobs. Even though, I mean, climate change is a reality and we have to deal with it. So creating sustainable jobs and a sustainable transformation of the economy is essential. So we don't get out of this in any case, however we call it. And I think, the one aspect is to create an economy that is environmentally friendly, but that is also equitable in terms of access for everyone, and also for benefits for everyone. It must be inclusive. And we should really make an effort to create it or to do everything that it can be inclusive. Inclusiveness, for example, also means that women can participate in economic life on all levels. And if you look at the paper, in African women have rights, but in fact, very often they cannot exert their rights because they don't have representation that allows them to enforce the rights which they have. And they also don't have the resources. And I think those three R's are very important to make women an important player in the economy. And I think that's an important part of just transition. I think another aspect is infrastructure development is also important for a just transition because everyone is using infrastructure. It's not usually not for someone only, it's like streets, like roads, like water, everyone can use. Also access to electricity is very important for just transition because if you don't have electricity you cannot participate in the digital world. Without electricity you cannot participate in creating more productive jobs because for all of that you need electricity. So I think if the state provides or helps to provide such things, then that will be a contribution to a just transition and also attracts private sector investors to help build up infrastructure. Yeah, I think those are a few things which I would like. One thing I would like to mention, I mean, the infrastructure topic is really important for Africa, in my opinion. Very interestingly enough, that did Albert not mention the huge effort China does on the continent to invest in infrastructure, and sometimes to the benefit of people, sometimes also a bit ambiguous. And I think that's something we have to look at also. How do we develop infrastructure? What are the means, and who will then in the end benefit from it?
Mm-hmm. Great. Let me ask Mr. Gerster, as you we know that by the time the development policy gets down to programs and projects, it's coming from a discussion between states. It's coming from agreements. And I want to just ask, there was a woman who said to me recently, we should forget about everything else and just go, the African Union, we should just ask the countries to report on 5 or 6 indicators. How many kilometers of road did you build? How many more people have access to water? How many more people have access to electricity? And this really made sense to me. She said, I don't know what all this talking and meetings and so on is about when 60 years after independence, we're still talking about 50% of people not having water and not having electricity. So the question is, Are these fundamentals being discussed at that high level? Is that conversation on the table? Because as African citizens, we sometimes have the impression that whether it is the World Bank or it is a German Development Corporation, you kind of let our states slide by on these fundamental questions. Is the discussion on the table?
So first of all, I would say the woman is totally right. Those are the things we have to talk about. How many kilometers of roads have been built, how many jobs have been created, how much has the basic income increased. And I mean, I'm not a state actor as such, I cannot speak for the governments, but I know that in bilateral negotiations, this is a topic. Maybe sometimes also the donor countries are too lenient. Sometimes maybe they're also not pushing for the right things, true. But very often they look at these issues and they also ask for the performance in those issues. And I think there's no other way than dialogue between two states. I mean, that's the strength, but also the weakness of bilateral cooperation. It must be on an equal foot. And yeah, I think if our government talks with your government, for example, about certain issues, that's a good thing.
Great. So we're going to open up to the audience. If you have questions for our panelists or if you have contributions on this topic, we would definitely like to hear from you. Questions? Yes, sir. It's right here in the middle. There's a...
Thank you very much. My name is Gilbert Rubangisa from Rwanda. So we hear about the different topics they are discussing. I'm very grateful for your questions. I was figuring out when I heard about the different initiatives, plans, and visions. But my flight from Kigali to Nairobi yesterday, my fare, my ticket was 580 USD, 580 USD, economy class. So, trade facilitation, discussions with the governments, etc. And I know some of us who have taken flight from Africa to Europe, they are paying 800 or 900 USD. So I have been hearing about initiatives, willingness is 10 years and more. So who's failing to do his or her homework? Yeah. So I was figuring out my ticket, Kigali, Nairobi, 1 hour and 40 minutes. Yeah. And it's 580 USD. Yeah. Now in 2022. So where is the problem? Thank you.
Exactly. And both of them are EAC, by the way. Yes. Let's maybe take a couple of more comments before we come up. We're missing the government people. How did we end up without the government people here? Unfortunately, they were both online and they were not, yeah. Okay, next, more questions, comments? There's a hand, yes.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My name is Edson Waivi from Uganda. As they were discussing about empowering MSMEs, the micro, small, and medium enterprises, I agree they are key to the development of these different states, but how do you strike a balance between governments being interested in the revenues? You realize most of the SMEs would survive, but still, government needs the revenue to survive more. So, in which way can government strike a balance to ensure that these SMEs are coming up, they are gaining ground, but at the same time supporting in a fair way? Because, for example, history in Uganda shows that around 75% of MSMEs that come up, they don't survive their first birthday. So how do we ensure that there's a win-win as government is interested in taxes, and which incentives can be put in place to make it better, other than levying the taxes and supporting them in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a third final question in the room? Okay, let's come over to this direction. There's 2 hands up.
Could I go first as I was standing? Okay. My name is Grace Zimba from Malawi. Just supporting the last speaker in terms of promoting the SMEs. My experience has been that in most of the times there are no efforts, especially when it comes to access to finance, because the businesses can be there, but they die a natural death because maybe they don't have access to finance. How can we make sure that maybe we support in this area? Thank you.
And yes.
Okay, thank you so much. And no offense to the first participant's comment on the airfare fee. For me, mine is like a benefit of regional integration already. My passport is still being renewed, and because of that, I was able to travel or to fly in from Kampala yesterday using my national ID. So yeah, kudos to the African Free Trade Area. So from the presentations that I've had, I would like more light shed on the linkage between the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and GIZ, because I'm trying to think about it, and I'm looking at the first one being policy reform, infrastructure development, both of which lead to regional integration, which is great. But then looking at GIZ as an implementer, and then also the fact that the work that GIZ does is split into short-term phases, or 2, 3, 4 years and things like that. So I'm trying to look at how the two come together, what links the two to actually get work done. Thank you.
Thank you. And then finally, the lady in red at the table, just right here. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jacinta from Malawi. My question is for, I don't remember his name.
Mr. Kalisa?
Yes. You talked about public-private dialogue, especially with the private sector being in the forefront to push certain agendas. My question would be for you, how did you manage to do that in Kenya? Because sometimes it does feel like there is some kind of pulling competition between the public and the private, whereby we are all heading for the same direction. The goal is to do, to improve the industry. So my question would be, what are the key elements from your side? How did the private sector get to that level of making sure that they have a great relationship with the public sector? Because I feel these two need to work together to ensure that they get to that certain place, but it shouldn't be like a pull and push kind of interaction. It needs to be something that is done on the same page.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Kalisa, I think I'll go to you already with a couple of questions, not just that one. How did you, how are you progressing in this public-private dialogue? But also if you can speak to the question of support to SMEs. One person's question was about taxes. How do we balance between taxing the SMEs, government needs revenue, but allowing them enough room to grow and become stronger? And the other person's question was about access to finance. So if you can take those two elements, dialogue and then support to SMEs.
Thank you very much. I think all the questions raised, these are very pertinent questions. Maybe I didn't give a clear background. East African Business Council, we are the regional apex organization that speaks and represents the interests of East African business community. And I think given that what we advocate for is borderless trade and investment in the EAC. So what we do, and our primary focus, we are the voice of the East African business, both corporates, large, small, and medium. And we have a strong engagement with the EAC Secretariat, with it in the Council of Ministers. We even, my chairman, he's an entrepreneur, he sits in the summit, and we are allowed to advocate and present the position papers on issues impacting the business, be it access to finance, be it issues of open sky, that is the airline issues now my brother was saying about when my colleague is here, Brian, will be sharing with you. We have 10 points advocacy now we are putting forward to address those issues that are what we call binding constraints to investment and trade in the region. So we table that through the council, we table that through the heads of state summit, and our leaders are able to listen and take them on board. So I think to respond to you, my sister, is that our work is evidence-based. It's evidence-based in terms of research, and I'm happy that GIZ has been one of our supporters in our advocacy agenda to do impact-related research. We put that on the table to our policymaker. Last week on Friday, I sat with the ministers for trade, what we call STIFL, to raise the issues of SMEs. And next week on 2nd, and I will invite you, we have a webinar on trade finance. We realize that trade finance, the current financial instrument we have, is not suitable for our SMEs. And we did a study, and we realized that the current instruments does not support the thrive and growth of our SMEs. The same for taxation. That has been one of the daunting challenges. We looked at domestic taxes. Our domestic taxes are not harmonized. Exercise, withholding tax income, that creates what we call distortionary impact on doing business. Come to the open sky policy. My brother mentioned it. One of the policy agenda that we are putting forward to the summit is the cost of our ticket. Our East African citizen to move from point A to point B. I give an example. The ticket from Burundi, Bujumbura, to Arusha, where I'm based, is 800 or sometimes $1,000. So it is cheaper to fly to Europe or Asia than flying within. What is the cause? What is the cause? What I call regulatory impediments. We impose fees and taxes on our own airlines. We should not be imposing taxes either on Rwanda Air or Kenya Airways or Tanzania Air. But landing fees is one of the detrimental for our travel in the region. So we need to remove those barriers that impede our people, our goods to move within the region. And I've been pushing that our intra-region trade is not growing because of cabotage, those regulatory impediments. In Europe, you move from one point A to point B, there are no taxes. But in the ASC, just moving from one border to another, there are taxes. So we cannot grow our SMEs. And we want SMEs to create the jobs. My brother Albert was talking about job creation. The job, when you look at the structure of our businesses, 80% are SMEs. So even when you look at the tax structure of our region, we are stuck at 15%. In other regions, it is 40% to the GDP because of our administrative hurdles that we impose on our businesses. So we are pushing hard at EABC. We are pushing hard through our national focal point. These are Apex private sector to ensure that those constraints that hinder the business growth are removed, are completely eliminated to ensure that the region recovers back better. We build back the society we want, we build the prosperity, we grow our business. It is through the business, as I mentioned, the treaty, EAC treaty is very clear. It is market-driven and people-centered integration. And I'm happy some of the constraints are being removed. My sister from Uganda said she can use her ID to move from Uganda to Kenya. She can use the same to go to Rwanda. So I think we need also to appreciate the efforts, especially with the EAC, more effort we have made in terms of integration, deepening the integration agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So sounds like one organization, the business community is organized. The business community is doing evidence-based advocacy. I think this is very important. They have a space. There's space for them at the political discussion level. There's space for them, but they're not coming there just with empty talk. They're coming there with evidence-based research, and they have had some support from Development Corporation, GIZ, for that. And also they are basing their advocacy on the treaty itself. I love to read the African treaties. My, what a wonderful continent we would have if we just implemented like 10%. But it's important that we hold the elected people to the treaties that they have signed. And Mr. Gesser, I am going to ask you the question about how GIZ exactly is supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area. How does this continental discussion get down to the programs? But there's also a question from online, which is asking, where is civil society in the sustainable development conversation? I would argue that private sector is part of civil society, no? But I think we are understanding the question to mean, where are the actors that are not business and that are not government? The actors that generally stand up for rights and advocate for vulnerable groups and advocate for, green transformation and all of this. So.
Thank you very much for this difficult to answer question. Thank you. First of all, what is GIZ? How is GIZ supporting the African Free Trade Area? I would answer on several levels. We are supporting actors. I mean, GIZ is doing mostly capacity development on all levels. So we try to build capacities for the state actors, but also for the non-state actors, to engage in the dialogue with each other, to have their perspectives being represented in the process to implement the free trade area on the continental level, let's say on the EU level, on the level of regional economic communities, let's say the EACs and the SADCs and the likes, and on the bilateral level. And we also work with businesses to bring their interests into this process. And that's for sure a long process. It's not a short thing, but yeah, that's how we work. We also, I mean, one must not only look at the support projects for the AFCFTA alone. In all private sector promotion projects, GIZ is supporting private sector actors to make use of the regulations and the new chances of the free trade area. Maybe you can add on that?
As one of the beneficiaries from GIZ, and again, I want to elaborate on the support by GIZ and other development partners like Trademark, like International Trade Center. What they do, again, it's not only the private sector. Currently, I'm speaking on about private sector, but we do have a forum bringing together the government, the EAC Secretariat, the civil society platform, regional civil society, and the East African Business Council, we representing the private sector. So through that, we agree on, and I want to really put it forward that there has been a shift in terms of paradigm, the way the donor funding activities that are important for Africans. in terms of we are demand-driven. They don't bring it to you. It's no longer that you impose to us that you want a green economy. No. East Africa, we know what we want. Under CFTA, there are several components we request GIZ to support. Like currently, they are going to support us on rules of origin. The rules of origin is the passport for the goods to move from border A to border B. So as the ABC, we submit a request to the GIZ, and we say that we need to train, sensitize our member to understand the continental free trade rules of origin, which are different from EAC rules of origin. What is the compatibility? So they provide both technical assistance and financial support, both TA and financial support. They bring experts in terms of supporting you to analyze what are the appropriate rules to enable you trade under the CFTA. When we go to standards, they also support in terms of standard harmonization and SPS measures, that is sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So we've engaged currently the EABC, they are supporting us to look at the barometers in the trade in goods. What are those goods that have been heavily impacted by COVID? And they fund the expert. The expert brings the study on board, we discuss, and the policy briefs are generated, which helps us to do the advocacy work, like my brother was mentioning, in terms of engaging our policymakers.
Okay.
Now that is a shift in terms of strategies, the different strategies government are making, and now the strategies that are inclusive, that have voices of private sector and voices of
civil society present. Back to you, Mr. Gester. There was, I think you still had a few points in terms of the, yes.
Maybe regarding the civil societies, in a working democracy is not only based on elections, and it has several elements that are important for a working democracy. And one element is public-private dialogue between the state and the private sector, but also between the state and the civil society. And we need a free press to report on abuses or misconduct and so on. So these elements are very important, and yeah, we're working usually on these levels to bring them together for a societal transformational process like we are talking about with the free trade area.
Great. Unfortunately, because of time, we're going to have to bring our panel to a close. I'm letting my guests get away because I had some nice questions in my pocket here about this feminist development, cooperation, and inclusiveness of women. Okay. We will take it to the next session because we are having a discussion on women's economic empowerment in the next session. I will just, leak it out there. Like, I noticed that we have, glass bottles on the table because probably GIZ is trying to buy responsibly and not use plastic bottles and so on. I wonder how much GIZ buys from women entrepreneurs. What's the policy on that? I had the same question for Albert Zerfak. Huh? Nice talk from the World Bank. I wonder how much of their spend goes to women entrepreneurs. I have to let these gentlemen go. We're having a lovely discussion with them, but we must, I'm over time. I will ask Eric just to put on the slides for the deep dive, and I'm going to ask you to just give a big, huge hand to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's something I'm trying to project here. Thank you. So, good afternoon again. These are the parallel deep dives. We have 3 of them. We have green transformation, we have women's economic development, and the future of jobs and digitalization. So the green transformation will be taking place in Mount Kenya 1. Just note that. There's a conference room called Mount Kenya 1. The women empowerment, economic empowerment is taking place in Mount Kenya 2. And future of jobs and digitalization is taking place in Mount Kenya 3. Now, to get to the Mount Kenyas, you go down the corridor and then you climb up. There's a stair on the right. So it's on that side of the building. You definitely won't get lost. If you get lost, please ask. So that is, I'll repeat the location. Green Transformation, Mount Kenya 1. Women Economic Empowerment, Mount Kenya 2. And the future of jobs and digitalization, Mount Kenya 3. For the virtual participants, there's a link that has been shared by Kadi. If you look at the chats, there's hyperlinks. You just click on that, and you should be able to join the meeting. And I think that's it for that. Thank you. Thank you very much. You may proceed.
Thank you, everyone. Let's move quickly. First floor to the deep dives.